on pitch decks for major gifts. So when I went out and started doing fundraising and really started understanding how donors thought, I realized that there is really this evidence-based way to present your information that is used by lots and lots of people who are in the for-profit field. And most nonprofits hadn't been let in on this little secret, even though there's a lot of tools out there for you to use. In fact, they're not taught about what pitch decks are, but I'm going to teach you today a little bit about that. So the most important thing, I think, initially to understand about a pitch deck is it's really a summary of your business plan. So if you don't have a business plan in place currently, doing a pitch deck is going to confuse you and it's not going to make a lot of sense. But it is a way to organize the information that needs to be in your business plan. And if you don't have all of these components, you'll realize it's time to go back and actually address some of this. Now, I'm doing an accelerator course, developing a pitch deck with 6 nonprofits right now, and several of them, as a result of pulling the pitch deck together, have really stepped back and said, maybe the way that we're doing business isn't really working. And they're realizing, because of the process of going through this process of organizing their business plan, that there's a really good reason that they haven't been getting major gifts. They haven't been able to tell the story in such a way that's compelling. So remember that if you don't have a business plan, it's going to be really hard to put a deck together. Secondly, it's a presentation format for major donors. This is not something that you would take out to the Rotary Club or the Women's League and use as a presentation. It's specifically designed to very quickly hone in for a major donor a very high-level overview of what you're trying to accomplish and why, and do that ask. That ask might be for another meeting. It might not be for money in the first meeting, but it's to really set you up to be able to explain your business plan so that you can do your pitch. It's not really meant to be that community presentation that just discusses what your organization does. Although components of this can make those presentations so much more powerful. It also can then be used as a guide for grants and fundraising. Now, I've also used the deck as a guide for those little videos that you use and can be used to support whatever the fundraising campaign is. So this deck you can follow through, and when they start asking about what's the problem, what's the outcomes, you'll have all that information kind of already organized. As I mentioned, it's a tool. It is not meant to be the end-all be-all, and you would have additional documents that you would have in, say, a folder that might have a 3-year pro forma and other documents to support your case, but this is a tool to organize your strategy. So when you think about your business plan, these are the components that I always work with my clients to help them develop in a easy to see format. So most strategic plans, and I'm not quite sure again why as nonprofits we're taught to do strategic plans instead of business plans, because I don't know, when for some reason we tend to be given this lesser quality education and tools that really are not that helpful. And so abandon the strategic plan would be my recommendation, and develop yourself a business plan. And that's going to be a different kind of strategy. You would definitely need to know what are your core values. And I just threw some examples in here. But they're the, core values are more about what do we want to have people experience when they come into contact with our organization. What's your mission? What problem are you trying to solve? Where do you want to be in 5 years? Now, this doesn't have to be incredibly detailed, because things like, I don't know, pandemics happen, right? So you do need to have some idea of where you want to be in 5 years and what that looks like, so that I could understand where your organization is going to be moving towards. Who are your clients and who are your donors? And this might seem really silly, but you'd be amazed how many nonprofits have not sat down and said, you know, this is actually our target client and this is our target donor. And then if you have earned revenue, you're going to have a completely different target market. And this is really important as you start moving forward and start thinking about social media, communications plans, things like that. You really need to understand that to be able to also explain to your donors who you're trying to help. I find that this sometimes is difficult for nonprofits that serve other businesses. They're more, as we call it, B2B instead of B2C. Again, in for-profit, that's a really clear thing, but a lot of times in nonprofits, we haven't clearly defined that. And then what makes you unique? What makes your organization stand out from all of the other nonprofits in your community or other nonprofits that are doing similar work? How are you different? And then what's that proven process? What is it that you do that makes the difference? And then finally, you're going to come up with, where are you going to be in 3 years? So 36 months from now, how will you be measuring the impact? What will success look like? And what will your outcomes be? This is really specific. And then you'll develop your 1 and 2 year plans, but this 3-year target is going to tell us exactly what you'll be able to accomplish by the time you've implemented your plan. So moving on, as I mentioned, there's lots of resources out there for pitch decks. And you can go online and Google pitch deck, and it's going to come up with a ton of different resources. Because this is not any kind of secret. The business community uses this as a tool all the time. The problem is the pitch decks that are developed for for-profits are different than the ones for nonprofits. So what I've done is adapted a for-profit pitch deck so that it's much more user-friendly for a nonprofit. And that's what I'm going to walk you through today. So what are the components? The components are really simple. They are, what is the history of the organization? And I don't want my clients to tell the story of how they were founded. Normally that's something like, oh, in 1968, we were founded in the city of Boston to address the issues of the homeless population. It's kind of dry, and a lot of times that's what is in your little elevator speech. I want to know why you were founded. One of my clients in the accelerator did such a beautiful job. She said, you know, I was a single mom. I had 1 diaper left, and my child had soiled her diaper, and I thought, I don't have enough money to get more diapers. And I was horrified and I was distraught. And I thought, I don't ever want anyone to be in this situation that I'm in right now. And so she started a diaper bank. And so that little piece of history is really a heart moment. I want to know, what was the spark? What was the cause that ignited the idea behind your nonprofit? It tells so much more around the impact that you're trying to have and the problem that you're trying to solve. The next piece is going to be, what are the accomplishments that you've done? So what's the organization's history? So over the last 10 years, this is what we've done. We've been able to accomplish housing individuals and making sure that they end up in permanent housing if you're a homeless program. If you're an environmental program, it might be that you've been able to save 400 acres of wetlands from development and pollution. Or, you've been able to purchase land where there are endangered species and save it from development. Whatever the issue is that your nonprofit's trying to solve, give people a little bit of history of how you've been successful in the past. Now, if you're a brand new nonprofit, you might not have accomplishments. So what do? Well, then you could go back and you can talk about, what's the evidence-based idea that your nonprofit is founded on? So what is it that you're going to be doing that somebody else has already done or that's proven to work that you're now going to be launching out in your community. And if you don't have that, if you just have a really good idea, but you have no clue if it's going to work, you're going to really struggle with your investors. So now we're going to talk next on the next slide or two about what the problem is that you're trying to solve. Now, this is not your organization's problem. This is not, we need more money for this program. This is a bigger community problem. You have to tell the person who's sitting across from you why they care about this problem. Why is it a problem, not just for your organization to solve, but why is this a problem for them? Why should they care about the issue that you're trying to solve? What happens if this issue isn't addressed? So this is really talking about a sense of urgency, a sense of need. It's something that is important to the community, and you're going to use statistics, you're going to use news article clippings perhaps that are in front of people's minds to really tell the story here. And then you're going to talk about what the solution is. So for instance, if we know we have people who are chronically homeless on the street, we know the solution is permanent housing. And we know that permanent housing and housing first moves people in the state that they are in the place that they're in, into permanent housing, and it has a very high success rate. We're not talking at this point yet about your particular programs, but we are talking about a solution that your organization is going to be taking on. So I hope that makes sense. It's a little bit bigger picture at this point, and then we're going to be funneling down even more to your organization. You're going to be talking about how you will solve that problem and what will happen because of your solution. So if your solution is then, not only we know permanent housing is something that is needed to make sure that people who are chronically homeless get off the streets, and your solution is to build permanent supportive housing units or convert a motel into permanent supportive housing units and provide wraparound services, if that's your solution, how will you know that that is successful? You could say things like being permanently housed at 1 year, that individuals will not end up back in the emergency room. Perhaps you also might be measuring recidivism rates for either youth or individuals coming out of prison. So again, the solution is how you are coming up with this overall, drill it down to what you're doing, and then talk to me about the success. You're also going to be talking about your budget. How much is this going to cost? Who's going to pull it off? Not just your team on board, but also partners, collaborators, that sort of thing. And who else thinks this is a great idea? Who's supporting this organization financially or with their credibility? These are your community champions. All right, so how do you use the deck? You use this deck to build and brand your organization. You're going to have talking points for each one. I always tell people, make sure you use no more than a few words on each slide. People tend to want to write paragraphs because they're so used to getting up and giving speeches. You can put all of that content down in the notes section, but don't put it on your deck. We want people paying attention to you and what you're saying and not trying to read a PowerPoint slide. So seriously, if you can keep it down to a few words, that's better with a great visual image or a graphic than infographic than it is to have a lot of content. Again, you're going to be having a conversation with a major donor, so you don't want to be putting in a lot of content on those decks. And then you don't want to read the slide or your talking points. Those talking points are only to trigger your memory to make sure you're covering everything. And you're going to be probably sitting down one-on-one or in a small setting anyway. Personalize it. Every deck should be personalized before you go in. It should be the statistics should be focused on them. So for instance, if you're talking to a hospital, you want to make sure you can talk about the impact on that hospital. If you're talking to a bank, you're going to be more economic. You're going to talk about people getting banked, people being able to buy homes. How is this impacting them? The more you can tie it back to your donor and how it's going to benefit them, the larger the gift will probably be. And always know what your ask is. This is my #1 rule. Never, ever, ever go into a meeting without knowing what your ask is going to be. Again, that ask might be more involvement, another meeting, or a specific dollar amount. And I always recommend that you have a specific dollar amount in your mind before you walk into that meeting, because you just never know. I actually had people in the first meeting write $1 million checks, or worse yet, ask how much do you need, and the person said, well, we really don't know yet, and then the ask was blown when they could have walked away with that 6 or 7 figure check. So always have in your mind exactly how much. And if you don't really know how much, that's where wealth evaluation software like iWave that we use really comes in handy to have a good idea of where you want to ask for money and how much. Be prepared to shift. If they start telling you that they have an issue with your plan, or they have questions, or again, if they want to talk to you about money, be prepared to make that shift. You have to be on your toes, watching their body language as you're using this deck, which is another reason you can't read the deck. It's got to be an interaction with the person that you're talking to. So what else can you have in your deck? Well, I recommend lots of photos. Again, this isn't supposed to be a presentation that you're teaching a conference with. This is telling the story about your organization. Yes, you should put in diagrams, site plans, building plans, especially if you're doing a capital campaign. Give them a visual of what this looks like. You can do a video as well. I've actually used a deck, turned a video that was very similar to the deck into a little bitty 2.5 minute video, and then continued on. And it was really powerful because some people learn in different ways. Some are visual and some are auditory. So having a little video or a testimonial mixed in there is always a good thing as well. You can also use quotes. Again, a photo or an image and then a quote from a client or two that supports the outcomes is another great thing. And then, of course, when you get down to the dollar figure, creating graphics with naming opportunities is really special. And honestly, I use Canva. It's free for nonprofits, and it's so easy to upload a picture and then just kind of mock up something. And the donors aren't expecting you to spend a lot of money. So you don't have to go and spend money on a graphic designer. Just make something up so that they can kind of get an idea of what it is. So here's an example of a slide that would talk about outcomes, or would talk about the problem, I'm sorry. The 90-day success to win over failure. This is actually something that was came out of a group I was working with that's doing prison reentry. And there's a 90-day window. And so 60% of people who aren't successful 90 days getting out of prison end up going back to prison. It's a really powerful statistic, but what I want you to see here is I have a great image that reinforces the statistic with very little information other than that 60% I want them to remember. You don't have to have a lot of content, but we do want to drive home, and I want them to remember that number, that if we don't fix them in 90 days, we don't catch them and help them, 60% are going back to prison. And then, of course, we have the economic impact of that as well. Here's a history. And again, this is combining kind of a history and our proof of concept or our success. We started in 1998. We had a vision of helping a single child heal with the help of one horse. So again, it gives me a little bit of a warm fuzzy. It makes me feel good about the fact that this started with one child, but now we serve over 600 people a year. And so I can kind of tell the history. And it does have the 1998, the year that they started, but it gives that heart tug. And I can tell the story along with that and be able to explain where we are now. This is a really great example of, again, trying to explain how we are successful and how we're different. Every donor wants to know about sustainability. They want to know, how are you going to keep your organization running? And they also want to know that if you take on a big project, how are you going to make sure that the organization is going to be stable and you're not going to end up not being able to afford that new building that you moved into or the new staff that you hired? And this is a great example of how we were able to talk about the fact that 50% of the revenue comes from earned revenue, and that expansion of the program would actually increase the earned revenue streams and continue to increase stability of the organization. So again, really simple example, really simple diagram there, sends a really strong message. And here's an example of an app that you could present and say, we wanted you to fund the app. And we've got the client's name there. Again, I just put a very simple image on there. You could put their logo or sponsored by or something like that and kind of mock this up. I'll give you an example of another one though, we have we'll have available a template pitch deck for you that has some examples of some other naming to opportunities that we've done. But this does give you kind of an idea of that. Now, what you would also do with this, though, is you would put the dollar figure in there and tell people exactly how much this is going to cost them to sponsor that. Couple of quick tips about doing the ask. Watch the body language and feel confident when you're ready to get to this point that you're doing something really wonderful and that they are going to get to be partners in that. You've made your case, be confident, ask them for the money, and then anybody who's in the room, if there's a board member with you or a volunteer, anyone else, I say just sit, either literally or figuratively, sit on your hands, close your mouth, and do not speak until the client speaks after you've made your ask. The donor speaks. You want to make sure that they have the opportunity to think. And typically that delay in silence is a time when we start to get really uncomfortable, but they're thinking about it. They will come back and they will ask you questions. But if you jump in, you're saving that tension that rises up that causes someone to really say, you know what, yeah, I think we can do this. Or a lot of times what happens is they say, you know, we need to not do, we can't do this right now. I have to talk to the foundation, or I need to talk to my partner, whoever that might be. So go in, have the dollar figure, have something mocked up for them, and then make sure that you do the ask, stay quiet until they respond, and then have a conversation. A lot of people who aren't comfortable with asks are worried that they're going to get upset. Please know, no one is going to take a meeting with you unless they are prepared to hear an ask. It doesn't mean that they're not going to say no, but it does mean that they are prepared to hear that ask. Wealthy individuals get asked for money all the time. And so if you come in prepared, you have all of your information pulled together, you're going to have a really great experience with that donor, and they're going to be really impressed with your nonprofit. One last thing I want to urge you to do. If you have not shared the deck with your donors, if you haven't gone by and just talked to them about what you're planning on doing, showed them some information before it's finalized, do that. People who are asked their opinion are more likely to be engaged and give than those who just get asked after the plan is already finalized. So many times we develop our plans in isolation, and I encourage my clients to go on what I call a listening tour. You could actually pay a for-profit company about $25,000 to do a feasibility study, but a listening tour connects you to the donors, not some stranger who's going to keep confidential and secret what your donors had to say. You want their feedback. And actually, what I hear from donors when I talk to them is that they really don't want to just be meeting with consultant individually. They want the nonprofit in the room. So unless you've got some sort of serious situation where you don't think that the donor will be honest with you, make sure you're the one that's going out, having that conversation, then coming back with a revised pitch deck based on the feedback that they've given you, ready for that ask. So I know a lot of you don't have a pitch deck, so I want to talk to you just briefly about our mastermind series. So we are really aware that a lot of times nonprofits don't have the kind of cash to be able to hire consultants to develop the plan and actually get this all pulled together. So we developed a mastermind series, and we've had several of them. They're incredibly successful. It's really transformative for the nonprofits that have participated. And here's kind of how it's broken out. We do 6 intensive sessions. This mastermind series is called our Accelerator. It's with me. We meet every single week for 5 weeks. And then the 6th session, we actually have you take your pitch deck and pitch it to a live philanthropist who then gives you feedback so that you can correct, adjust, and make any changes that you need to make before you take it back and start using it in your community. Every single class, you get tools, templates, and training to make sure that you have the components necessary to build this deck. We go everything from building your plan, developing your outcomes. You get budget templates, finance, an understanding of how to develop that 3-year budget, pull together a campaign number, and how to build this deck out so that your organization is really being presented in its best possible light to major donors in the community. So the next mastermind series starts on May 11th. We only have 4 slots available. We've already had 1 person sign up. We are giving a discount for this next session. It's a 1/3 off. And normally this sort of process would cost about $5,000 to $10,000, depending on what we did with you. Typically, if I went through this with a client, it would be upward of $15,000. So this is significantly reduced. You're in a small group with only 4 other nonprofits. It's you and a team member. And we are so convinced that you will be thrilled with the process that we're going to give you your money back if you attend all 5 sessions and are not completely excited about it. So I want to know from all of you, if you want to find out more, by the way, you can go on to sharityglobal.com. There's a button on our homepage. You can find out more about the Accelerator, which again starts on May 11th. But I want to take questions now from everyone. So if you are watching us live on Facebook, or if you're here with us on the Accelerator, please, what questions do you have? So I see we've got a bunch of people on the webinar right now. Please, what questions do you have about building a deck, about building your business plan, about presenting it to donors? Go ahead and just enter your questions in the chat. If you're on Facebook watching this right now, you can go ahead and just comment in the Facebook section, and my team will text me the questions that come up. All right, we have, is the pitch deck meant to be shown in person during the meeting? In other words, if you meet a donor in person, do you bring your laptop? Yes, you do. I have a Surface, and I bring my Surface Pro. I typically will, while I'm getting ready to meet with the client, if I have a video and it's not embedded, which you should try to embed it, by the way, I will have it all set up, everything connected to my hotspot, and I do use it right there with my laptop or with my Surface Pro, which is a little bit larger than an iPad. But you can do it with an iPad or something large. Don't do it on your phone. It is also, because of COVID, an excellent, excellent tool to use with donors on Zoom. So even though people are starting to get their vaccines, a lot of people are still not completely comfortable meeting face-to-face. So to be able to show this on Zoom is really, really helpful. And do what I just did. As soon as you're finished, take it down. Don't leave it up so you can see people's faces. So how long should the deck take to walk through? It really needs to be less than 10 minutes, 15 max. You have about 30 minutes to meet with the donor, and you want to definitely be able to take questions, answer anything that they might have, and then also be able to do that ask. So I always try to keep those ask meetings 30 minutes. And if I'm going to go over the 30 minutes, I will ask permission if we can continue, even if they're continuing to talk. I will say, you know, I only asked for 30 minutes today. I want to be respectful of your time. Would you mind if we continue? Because I'm really enjoying your feedback. And make sure you get that permission. And then if you are doing it virtually, follow up with your packet of information that day. Do not wait until the next day to follow up with a thank you note, as well as your packet of information, anything that they've asked for as a follow-up. If it just ends up being a meeting and there isn't any follow-up information because you have a leave behind, you can do a personalized handwritten note. I cannot stress how important that is. Handwrite them a note and put it in the mail. Again, do it that day. You can already have it pretty much addressed and ready to go, but follow up with a thank you note. So Jean says she works on a board of a domestic violence organization, and we basically apply for various government grants, but we also get funding from local donors. But the donors are basically just local residents. I'm not sure if we could find a large organization or large donor for our organization. So I will tell you that this works really well with government funders. Remember, government funders are still major donors. In fact, most of the time they're our largest donors. And they want to know that you have a plan, that they're just not tossing taxpayer dollars into a bottomless pit that churns out, you know, people coming into shelter or safety plans or hotline calls. Those are outputs, not outcomes. So when you can articulate how you are saving tax dollars, and I have a study that you can download on charityglobal.com under resources about how to measure local impact and ROI. When you can do something like that and tell your story in a better way, you can actually draw down more money. I've actually taken a pitch deck, gone to government funders, and got my own line item in the county budget for $300,000 when for 6 years we could not get them to give us any money. It was shifting the message that made the difference. The other thing is, even if you live in a small community and you have local donors, those people own businesses. You have a hospital more than likely. You have other groups there that can fund this. You just need to figure out why your problem that you're trying to solve is a problem for them as well. And then make that case for support. And for domestic violence, incredibly easy to do on so many different levels. And there's a lot of tools, again, that are in that report that you can use. So do you need to change your pitch deck when pitching to different donors? Yes. I would strongly recommend that you shift and change different parts of your deck based on your donor. And remember when I said with your plan, you need to have your target donors and your target clients. Certain donors are going to be interested in certain components of what you do, and then they may not be interested in other things. I'll use an example from a domestic violence shelter I worked with. They had 3 different categories of funding that they wanted: prevent, protect, and prevail. Prevent was all their prevention programs with youth. Protect was their emergency shelter, and then prevail was all of their counseling and support programs that they had, housing, transitional housing, that sort of thing. They then broke up their outcomes based on protect, prevent, prevail, and were able to then focus on the ones that that donor they knew would want to fund, that was most important to that donor. The other thing you can do is you can actually pull statistics out specifically for that donor that's going to be a little bit more focused on what you know about them. And again, if you haven't met with them, have that first meeting, ask them about the plan, get their thoughts and their insight. Do not go in with you can say, we are not going to ask for money. I really just want your feedback. That's going to help you gather information about what that donor really cares about. So then you'll be prepared to customize that deck when you do go back for that ask. So do you write the dollar ask on the pitch deck or share it verbally? I write it on the dollar. I write it on the deck. I absolutely put it on the deck. I say it. It's verbally there. I will talk to them about they can make the gift over 3 to 5 years, depending on what you've decided for your campaign. But I very clearly tell them how much we're looking for and what the investment opportunity is. If they balk and they say, you know, that's really too much, I will have available other naming opportunities that might be of a lesser amount. But again, if you've gone in ahead of time and done your own community listening project or feasibility study, you can actually ask them during that meeting. These are the different giving levels that we're going to have to bring in order to meet our goal. Do you see your organization or you personally being anywhere on this? And then you'll also, again, have a better idea. That wealth screen also helps with that. It'll give you some insight into what number you should hit. So when you write outcomes in the deck, do you project what you hope will be the outcomes for the proposed solution, or do you talk about current outcomes and the fact that they will expand? Well, that's a really good question. It really depends on, is this a new program, or is this something that you're going to be expanding? If you're expanding, you're going to talk about current outcomes and how you will have a larger impact because of your expansion that you're doing. If it's new, then that's where I said you really need to be able to say, when this was done in New York City, here was the impact. This is what happened. I've done pilot projects before that were really completely innovative. No one's ever tried it before. But what we were able to say is, while this has never been done before, we truly are confident in the success of this. Here are the outcomes that we are going to measure. This is what we believe will happen. And then we were able to come back. And in fact, we were incredibly successful with the first pilot. When we took it to another community with a different funder, it failed miserably because of some interesting situations. We went into a very high crime neighborhood. It didn't have the same community engagement that the other community had. And we were able to go in and say, look, it didn't work here, and here's why. And because we were very clear, we were measuring it, and they knew that we were very thoughtful about how it worked and how it didn't work, they actually gave us more money to go into a different community, and it expanded even further. So even if your program is not successful, it really is, at least you're making the case to your donor that you've tried it, it didn't work, and here's what you're going to do differently. Too many nonprofits don't even know if their programs even work. And in my outcome versus outputs versus outcomes workshop, I talk about Great and Dare, which were programs run by police officers. Millions of dollars were spent, and they actually caused kids to get involved in gangs and use drugs more than if they hadn't taken the prevention program. You have to know, does your program actually work? And if you can't go through it, pitch it to someone and have them say, oh, wow, that's really neat. That's great. I think that's going to change the world, or at least change lives. Then you really need to rethink what you're doing and whether or not it's having an impact and whether or not it's valuable to a donor to invest in. So do you have a pitch deck template? Yes, we do in fact have a pitch deck template. We're right now finalizing it, putting some last little spin touches on it. It will be up in our Knowledge Center. So hopefully within the next day or so, certainly by Monday, if you go up, you'll be able to go in. You have to create an account, but it's absolutely free. Everything in the Knowledge Center is free. Create an account, go in there, and you'll be able to download a full template of the pitch deck with examples. So it'll walk you through every single piece that you need with helpful hints. And of course, if you need some assistance with that, we have Sharity experts who are all seasoned nonprofit executives in a former life who are available to consult with you and your nonprofit and help you build out that pitch deck so it's just as impactful as it can be. Of course, I'd love to have you in my next accelerator as well. Again, it starts on May 11th. We are also on the 12th going to be having a panel of some of our Sharity experts about how to write grants. And will be linking back to this as well. I believe that they put the link in the chat box. So if anybody wants to see that, you can click on that and learn more. There's even a PDF you can download if you need to go and get it approved by your board or take it out to a donor and ask them to fund it. So are there any last minute questions? I really appreciate everybody being on the webinar today. I'm so glad you actually got to see my PowerPoint presentation, which was awesome, rather than just hearing me chat about it. It's great with visuals. If you are interested in that pitch deck, make sure again you go onto the accelerator, onto the Knowledge Center, sign up for that. We'll be getting that uploaded here in just a few days. I'm really excited to share that pitch deck template with you. And let me know if you are interested in joining me for the next accelerator to help take your organization to the next level with your pitch deck. Good luck. I hope you learned something really valuable today, and I hope you can take it back immediately and use it for your organization. Thank you so much for being with me today.